Major League Baseball fans know that Cuba is famous for having incredible athletes. Some of them are even household names. What a lot of fans don't realize about these Cuban players is that they had to struggle with basic human rights in order to achieve their MLB dreams. In this documentary, I'm going to tell you a little bit about their story. In 1958, during the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro overthrew the Cuban government and made Cuba a full communist state. Presidents Eisenhower and Kennedy implemented trade embargoes against Cuba because of the growing fears of the communist regime and Castro's ties to the Soviet Union. Along with many other tough regulations, Castro banned all professional sports in Cuba. Baseball was nationalized. Players were only allowed to play in the Cuban National Series, a league system that helps decide the Cuban national team that represents the country in international tournaments. Baseball remained the most popular sport in Cuba, and Cubans saw baseball as a symbol of the revolution. Most Cubans live on little to no pay and struggle with access to basic needs required to survive. There is no exception for successful Cuban athletes, from wrestlers to footballers to Cuba's greatest baseball players. As popular as baseball is, being a Cuban baseball player is not an easy life. Some players have reported having to steal basic necessities such as toilet paper and soap from hotels they stay in while traveling for games because they are unable to afford them at home. So it is no surprise that Cuban players want to leave Cuba to play baseball in the major leagues, where they can make a lot more money and earn a very good living to share with their family. However, because of the trade embargoes introduced in the 1960s, Cuban citizens are not allowed to sign a contract with the MLB. They are forced to defect. Defection is the act of leaving a country or a political party to establish citizenship in another one. In Cuba, defection is illegal. Cubans who defect are not allowed to return to Cuba for 8 years. Most people strongly believe this is a direct violation of the 13th human right of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, which states, "Everyone has the right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each country, and everyone has the right to leave or return to any country, including his own." Defection is a very dangerous journey. Players have to risk their lives, risk endangering their family, and risk getting caught and imprisoned. But that still does not stop them from trying to fulfill their dreams. Since 1960, there have been 80 Cuban baseball players who successfully defected from Cuba and made it to the majors. Many of them have gone on to have incredibly successful careers. Here are a few of their stories. The 90s was a time when many Cuban players considered defecting but thought it would be too risky. However, in 1991, Rene Arocha defected, opening the floodgates for many others. In the next 5 years, 20 Cuban baseball players would defect, the most notable being Orlando Hernandez. After Livian Hernandez defected, his brother, El Duque Hernandez, was eager to leave as well because of his brother's success in the majors. However, Orlando was banned from Cuban baseball because the news of his brother's defection angered Cuban officials. He finally came up with a plan to defect in 1997. He departed on Christmas Day. He left on a small boat. On his journey, he was intercepted by the U.S. Coast Guard in Bahamian waters. They handed him off along with the others to the Bahamian police. They were brought to the detention center and would later be held in court. With help from sports agent Joe Cubas, Orlando was released under a special status known as humanitarian parole that would allow him to continue on his journey to America to live out his baseball dreams. He would go on to win 4 World Series, 3 with the Yankees and 1 with the White Sox. During the 2000s, Cuba was starting to crack down on defectors. For many, it took multiple tries to leave the country. Star closer Aroldis Chapman failed on his first attempt to defect. He was invited to Havana to speak with the then-president Raul Castro, who suspended him for the rest of the National Series and left him off the 2008 Olympic team, who won gold without him. In 2009, Aroldis Chapman walked out the front door of the team hotel in Rotterdam, Netherlands. He entered an automobile. He later established residence in Andorra near Spain. Nicknamed the Rocket, Chapman holds the record for the fastest pitch ever recorded at 105.8 miles per hour, making 7 All-Star games and winning 2 World Series.
That would hit 106. That would be a new record for the hardest pitch ever thrown.
Jose Fernandez defected in 2008. just 2 years after his dad defected after 14 tries. He and his mother tried 3 times, but were sent back to Cuba. They eventually departed for Mexico rather than Miami, where they attempted the first 3 times. At one point, Fernandez's mother was thrown overboard by a wave. Thankfully, he was able to save her. They later arrived at a small town on the Mexico-Texas border, where they were able to cross as refugees. They made their way to Miami to live with Jose's father. In 2011, he was drafted by the Miami Marlins and went on to win Rookie of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year, and 2 All-Star games. The 2010s was a decade of headlines, with players like Yasiel Puig defecting and making international news because of his success along with his sensational story. Yasiel may take the title for the most incredible escape. In April 2012, then 21-year-old Yasiel Puig stood on a beach along with the 4 others waiting to be picked up by smugglers from Mexico. After hiking 30 hours to a small secluded beach, all 5 were picked up by a ragged boat that would head to Isla Mujeres, not knowing what was next. They arrived in a port off the coast of Cancun. Yasiel and the others were loaded into a van. The group later arrived at a no-tell hotel. They were in for one heck of a night. Puig, locked in a small room in the hotel, was in the custody of Los Zetas, known to be the deadliest drug cartel in Mexico. Los Zetas was asking $250,000 from Raul Pacheco, the potential buyer, in exchange for young Puig. Pacheco was a known criminal and AC repairman. He did not have this kind of money. Week after week went by with no pay, and Los Zetas decided to up the price to $400,000. Finally, Raul agreed that he'd pay the price. However, he had secretly planned to kidnap Puig from the cartel. On a call with Puig, Raul told him to expect a knock on the door late that night. Around 1 a.m., the knock arrived. 2 men dressed in black led Yasiel Puig and the others out of the hotel and into the streets of Isla Mujeres. Puig would then fly to Mexico City, where he established residence and eventually signed a 7-year, $42 million contract with the Dodgers. Randy Arozarena was born in Cuba. He defected in 2015 at just 19 years old on a small raft en route to Mexico. He would later say during an interview, "When you're on the ocean, the only thing you're thinking about and hoping for is that you get there safely." As he did, later signing a contract with the Cardinals. He also played for Mexico in the World Baseball Classic, where he led the team to the semifinals and would later lose to the eventual champions, Japan. He made many jaw-dropping catches and put up a stellar stat line to make the all-tournament team. Randy Arozarena also saw great success during the 2023 All-Star Weekend in Seattle, where he was the runner-up in the Home Run Derby and robbed a home run in the All-Star Game from first baseman Freddie Freeman. These are just a handful of the incredible stories of players that have left Cuba to pursue their baseball dreams. Each player has paved the path for many others and brought awareness to the world about the importance of their basic human rights. After 7 decades of Cuban baseball players' human rights being abused, the MLB reached an agreement with the Cuban Baseball Federation. On December 19th of 2018, the agreement was signed. Cuban baseball players would no longer have to defect. An MLB team could pay the Cuban government to sign a player. Players could return to Cuba as a citizen and play in the Cuban League during the off-season. Many former defectors spoke out enthusiastically about the agreement. Jose Iglesias, who defected in 2008, said, "The next generation of Cuban baseball players will be able to sign a contract from Cuba, and they will be able to keep their earnings as every other player in the world. They will be able to return to Cuba, they will be able to share with their families and play the sport they love against the best players in the world without fear or trepidation. Great day for Cuban baseball players." However, on April 8th of 2019, before the agreement could take effect, the Trump administration terminated the agreement, crushing the dreams of many Cuban baseball players with the hopes of playing baseball in the U.S.